What happens when a team riding the hottest streak in hockey suddenly realizes they're one piece away from championship glory, but that piece costs a king's ransom and comes wrapped in salary cap nightmares? Folks, the Edmonton Oilers are rolling. McDavid and Draisaitl are playing like gods. They're tied atop the Pacific Division. Everything is clicking. But here's the brutal truth that keeps Stan Bowman up at night. When the playoffs arrive and the intensity ratchets up to 11, you need more than two superstars. You need depth. You need defense. You need that shutdown defenseman who can eat minutes, kill penalties, and make life miserable for opposing forwards. Enter Colton Parayko, the 6'6", 230-pound St. Louis Blues defenseman who NHL insiders are now linking to Edmonton as the perfect deadline acquisition. But here's where the story gets complicated. Acquiring Parayko isn't just expensive, it might be impossible. A first-round pick, mid-round selections, prospects, and roster players just to make the salaries work. So, buckle up, because we're diving deep into the most intriguing and potentially most complicated trade scenario facing the Oilers as the deadline approaches. Can they pull off the heist of the century? Or will the price tag prove too steep even for a team desperate to win now? Let's start with the obvious question: why Colton Parayko? Why is this 32-year-old defenseman suddenly the talk of Edmonton's trade deadline plans? The answer is simple. He's exactly what the Oilers need. Parayko stands 6'6" and weighs 230 pounds. That's not just big, that's imposing. That's the kind of physical presence that changes how opposing forwards attack the net. When you're driving to the crease and you see Parayko waiting for you, you think twice. You hesitate. And in playoff hockey, that split-second hesitation is the difference between scoring and getting shut down. But Parayko isn't just a big body, he's a legitimate top-four defenseman who can eat minutes in all situations. He plays on the penalty kill. He quarterbacks the power play when needed. He's defensively responsible, positionally sound, and brings over a decade of NHL experience to the table. Jeremy Rutherford and Chris Johnston of The Athletic recently examined the Blues trade landscape and specifically named the Oilers as one of two logical landing spots for Parayko. Johnston wrote, "Parayko's contract should age like a fine wine in an environment where a surging salary cap sends player salaries skyrocketing. Provided his game doesn't implode, it's reasonable to expect him to remain a positive value asset for the remainder of the deal." When you couple that with the fact Parayko's been a steady contributor in St. Louis for more than a decade, it's little wonder teams come calling. That last part is crucial. Teams come calling. Edmonton isn't the only franchise that sees Parayko's value. The Vegas Golden Knights are also mentioned as a potential suitor. And if there's one thing we know about Vegas, it's that they're not afraid to go all in when they identify a target. So, the Oilers aren't just competing against the Blues asking price, they're competing against other contenders who want the same thing they do. For Edmonton, the appeal is obvious. They already have Evan Bouchard running the power play and providing offensive punch from the blue line. What they need is someone who can shut down the opposition's top lines, someone who can clear the crease, someone who brings that physical defensive-first mentality that becomes invaluable in the playoffs. Parayko checks every single box. The question is, can they afford him? Now, let's talk about the elephant in the room, Parayko's contract. He's in year 4 of an 8-year, $52 million extension he signed with the Blues back in 2021. That breaks down to a $6.5 million annual cap hit. And here's the kicker. He's got 4 more years remaining after this season. For most teams, that would be a deal breaker. Committing $6.5 million per year through 2029 to a defenseman who's already 32, that's a massive risk. Players decline. Injuries happen. What looks like a solid contract today can become an albatross tomorrow. But here's where the Oilers situation gets interesting. They're not most teams. They're a win-now franchise with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl in their absolute primes. They've been to the Stanley Cup final 2 consecutive years and fallen short both times. They don't have the luxury of thinking about 2029. They need to win now. And as Johnston pointed out, Parayko's contract might actually age well. The salary cap is rising. Player salaries are skyrocketing. What seems like $6.5 million today might look like a bargain in 2 or 3 years when average defensemen are commanding $8 million annually. But acquiring Parayko isn't just about accepting his contract. It's about making the money work within Edmonton's current cap structure. And that's where things get really complicated. The Oilers are already tight against the cap. They just acquired goaltender Tristan Jarry, who's already injured, by the way. More on that disaster in a moment. They have long-term commitments to McDavid, Draisaitl, and several other key players. Finding $6.5 million in cap space isn't like finding loose change in your couch cushions. It requires surgical precision and painful sacrifices. So, what would it actually take to land Parayko? According to Rutherford and Johnston's estimates, we're looking at a first-round pick, a mid-round pick, a prospect, a roster player to balance salaries. Let's break that down piece by piece, because each component presents its own unique challenge. The draft picks. Edmonton doesn't own its first-round pick this season. It was already traded away. But they do have first-rounders in each of the next 3 drafts, plus a healthy stock of mid-round selections. So, on the draft pick front, they have the ammunition. The question is whether Stan Bowman is willing to mortgage the future for a win-now move. Given the current trajectory of this team, given McDavid and Draisaitl's dominance, given the favorable schedule ahead, the answer is probably yes. When you have a legitimate championship window, you don't hold onto draft picks like they're sacred. You cash them in for proven talent. The prospect, this is where things get trickier. Edmonton's prospect pool isn't exactly overflowing with blue-chip talent. They've been a competitive team for years, which means they've been drafting late in rounds and trading picks for immediate help. Whatever prospect they offer would need to be enticing enough for St. Louis to bite, but not so valuable that Edmonton cripples their future depth. It's a delicate balance, and one that requires careful evaluation of both organizations' needs, the roster players. And here's where the real headache begins. To make the money work, Edmonton needs to send salary back to St. Louis. The article mentions several candidates: Andrew Mangiapane, $3.6 million AV, Kasperi Kapanen, $1.3 million, David Tomasek, $1.2 million, Adam Enrique, $3 million, but he has a full no-movement clause and has already declined to waive it before. None of these are particularly appealing options for the Blues. Mangiapane has struggled. Kapanen and Tomasek are depth pieces at best. Enrique might refuse to waive his no-move clause again. This is the puzzle that keeps Stan Bowman up at night. You can have all the draft picks and prospects in the world, but if you can't make the cap math work, the deal dies before it even gets to the negotiating table. Before we go any further, we need to address the goaltending situation, because it directly impacts Edmonton's ability to make another move. The Oilers recently acquired Tristan Jarry from Pittsburgh, presumably to shore up their net-minding heading into the playoffs. And what happened? He's already injured, already sidelined. The move that was supposed to solve one problem has created another. Now, Edmonton is in a position where they've committed assets and cap space to a goaltender who can't play, and they still need to address other areas of the roster. It's a nightmare scenario for any general manager. This brings us to the fundamental question facing Stan Bowman. What's the priority? The article lays out 3 potential avenues: adding a legitimate top 6 forward bolstering the bottom 6 with an impactful depth piece, bringing in another steady defenseman to solidify the blue line. Parayko obviously falls into that third category. But is defense really the biggest need? When you look at Edmonton's current roster, they have Bouchard providing offense from the back end. They have decent depth on defense. What they might actually need more is another scoring threat up front, someone who can take pressure off McDavid and Draisaitl when opponents key in on them. But here's the counterargument. In the playoffs, defense wins championships. You can have all the offensive firepower in the world, but if you can't shut down the opposition's top lines, if you can't protect leads, if you can't win the tight, grinding games, you're going home early. Parayko gives you that shutdown ability. He gives you size, experience, and defensive reliability. in a 7-game series against Vegas or Colorado or Dallas, having Parayko on your blue line could be the difference between advancing and going golfing. Now let's inject some cold, hard reality into this conversation. Acquiring Parayko is going to be incredibly difficult. First, there's no guarantee the Blues even make him available. Johnston wrote that it's going to be mighty difficult to get the Blues to part with him. St. Louis might decide they want to keep their veteran defenseman, especially if they're not completely committed to a rebuild. Second, even if Parayko becomes available, the Oilers aren't the only team interested. Vegas is lurking, and we all know how aggressive Vegas can be when they identify a target. They have fewer cap constraints, more flexibility, and a proven track record of making blockbuster deadline deals. Third, the price tag is astronomical. A first-round pick, additional picks, a prospect, and roster players. That's a massive haul for a 32-year-old defenseman with 4 years left on his contract. Is Parayko good? Absolutely. Is he worth gutting your future for? That's the million-dollar question. And finally, there's the cap situation. Making $6.5 million fit into Edmonton's current structure requires either St. Louis retaining salary, unlikely, or the Oilers moving out significant money, difficult given the players they have available to trade. All of these factors combine to make this deal incredibly complicated. It's not impossible. Nothing is impossible in the NHL, but it's going to require creativity, sacrifice, and probably a bit of luck. So, where does this leave the Edmonton Oilers as they approach the trade deadline? They're a team on fire, riding the brilliance of McDavid and Draisaitl, sitting atop their division, and staring at a favorable schedule that could propel them deep into the playoffs. But they're also a team with holes to fill, cap constraints to navigate, and difficult decisions to make. Colton Parayko represents the kind of impact defenseman that could take this team from contender to champion. His size, experience, and defensive reliability are exactly what Edmonton needs for a deep playoff run. But acquiring him comes with a price tag that might be too steep, even for a team desperate to win now. The next few weeks will be fascinating. Will Stan Bowman pull the trigger on a blockbuster deal? Will he find a creative way to make the cap math work? Or will the Oilers decide to stand pat and ride with what they have? One thing is certain. With McDavid and Draisaitl playing at this level, the window is wide open. The question is whether management has the courage and the cap space to push all the chips to the center of the table. If the idea of the Oilers landing Parayko gets you as excited as it does me, or if you think the price tag is too steep and they should look elsewhere, drop a comment below and let's debate it. Should Edmonton mortgage the future for a win-now move? Or should they trust the roster they have and ride McDavid and Draisaitl to glory? Hit that like button if you want more deadline coverage, and subscribe because the next few weeks are going to be absolutely wild. The trade deadline is approaching, and the Oilers are right in the thick of it.